evening, voters. It's been a long and exciting day. And at the end of this day, there is only one question tonight. Will this election budget propel the BJP to victory in the summer of 2019 in the general election battle this year? Because there is no denying the fact that this budget was written with only votes in mind. Farmers, salaried class, laborers, a budget with something for all, says the government. So a 6,000 rupee annual income that is likely to benefit 1.2 crore farmers and their households, so that's even higher a number. A 3,000 rupee pension for 10 crore workers, laborers from the unorganized sector. And a tax relief that is expected to benefit about 3 crore middle class citizens. That's the math right there for you. To add to that, the budget speech had all the right keywords. Search engine optimization has been utilized well by the finance minister and his team in this budget speech. Will it work? Will the Indian voter buy this? Will it help BJP garner more votes, appease those who had been disappointed, who had been angry with the government, especially after demonetization and GST? That's the question we are asking tonight. But before we go across to our expert panel, let's first up bring to you a conversation that I had with the MOS of Agriculture. We spoke to him about the new farm scheme that has been announced. How will the implementation be? What's the plan? Listen in. Shekhawat ji, aap hame bataएं, if you can explain to us, how will this policy, how will this scheme be implemented? Do you have the database ready? Because the government intends to start giving the income from this year itself.
देखिए, देश की सरकार ने माननीय नरेंद्र मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में जब सरकार बनी थी, उस समय जो कमिटमेंट किया था, हमारी सरकार गांव, गरीब, किसान, इनको समर्पित सरकार रहेगी। और पिछले 5 साल में सरकार ने जिस तरह से इन सब क्षेत्रों के कल्याण के लिए काम किया और आम मानवी के जीवन में परिवर्तन लाने का काम किया है, आज का ये बजट और इस बजट में की गई घोषणा, चाहे वो किसान के लिए की गई है, चाहे वो मजदूरों के, अनऑर्गेनाइज सेक्टर के मजदूरों के लिए की गई है या मध्यम वर्ग के लिए की गई है, ये निश्चित रूप से इन तीनों के लिए एक मील का पत्थर साबित होगी। जहाँ तक प्रधानमंत्री किसान सम्मान निधि या प्रधानमंत्री किसान योजना का प्रश्न है, पीएम किसान योजना में लघु और सीमांत श्रेणी के किसान जिनके पास 2 हेक्टेयर की ज़मीन है, 5 एकड़ तक जिनके पास में ज़मीन है, उन सब परिवारों को जब किसान खेती करता है उस समय उसका जो व्यय होता है उसमें हैंड होल्ड करने के लिए, उसमें सहायता करने के लिए देश की सरकार ने 6,000 रुपये तक प्रत्येक किसान परिवार को देना ऐसा सुनिश्चित किया है। डायरेक्ट बेनिफिट ट्रांसफ़र से ये पैसा ट्रांसफ़र होगा, आधार से लिंक करके इसको किया जाएगा, लेकिन जहां आधार नहीं है अभी इस वर्ष में, वहां दूसरे आइडेंटिटी प्रूफ्स के माध्यम से भी इसको लिंक करके और इस बेनिफिट को ट्रांसफ़र करेंगे। डेटा लगभग सब रेडी है और कम से कम ये बात तो निश्चित है कि माननीय नरेंद्र मोदी जी की सरकार ने अब तक जो कहा है वो करके दिखाया है, चाहे वो जनधन खाते खोलने का विषय हो या सॉइल हेल्थ का विषय हो, चाहे मुद्रा का विषय हो, जो कहा है वो करके दिखाया है। मैं विश्वास के साथ मैं कह सकता हूं कि 31 मार्च से पहले देश के लघु और सीमांत कृषकों को ये सौगात, ये हैंड होल्डिंग राशि जो है ये उनके खातों में पहुंचेगी।
जी, एक बात जो उठाई जा रही है कि ये जो आपने पॉलिसी अनाउंस करी है, ये उन लोगों के लिए जो लैंड ओनर्स हैं, जिनके पास ज़मीन है, चाहे वो 2 हेक्टेयर या 5 एकड़ जो भी कैलकुलेशन रहे। लेकिन आज जो देश में समस्या है, जो हमने प्रोटेस्ट भी देखे हैं महाराष्ट्र में और काफ़ी अलग स्टेट्स में, वो उन लोग की प्रोटेस्ट है जो लैंड ओन नहीं करते हैं, उनको भी सहायता की ज़रूरत है। तो उन लोगों का क्या होगा, उनको मदद कैसे पहुँचेगी?
देखिए, यदि मैं कुल मिलाकर के ज़मीन के विषय में बात करूं तो देश का अधिकांश तबका जो लघु और सीमांत कृषक के किसान हैं, वो अधिकतया सारे लोग लैंड ओनर्स खेती करते हैं मैक्सिमम नंबर्स में। लेकिन कृषि क्योंकि राज्य सरकारों का विषय है, हमने इस समस्या की जो कृषि क्षेत्र में काम करने वाले जो मजदूर हैं, लैंडलेस फार्मर्स हैं, उनके कल्याण के लिए भी हमने योजना बनाकर राज्यों को भेजी है और राज्य उसको इम्प्लीमेंट करेंगे।
दूसरा सवाल मेरा आपसे ये था कि जो ये 2,000 रुपये इस साल और 6,000 अगले साल से आप सालाना देंगे, तो ये सिर्फ किसान के फर्टिलाइज़र और बाकी जो सीड्स वगैरह खरीदने हैं उसके यूज़ के लिए है क्या? इसके लिeu में आप जो सब्सिडी दे रहे हैं वो सब्सिडी वापस ले ली जाएगी, या जो सब्सिडीज़ जो सहायता अभी मिल रही है किसान को बाकी वो रहेगी और ये उसके ऊपर का 6,000 रुपया है?
ये उसका निश्चित रूप से ये उसका एडिशनल है। पिछली जितनी इंटरेस्ट सबवेंशन की स्कीम हो, चाहे कृषि अनुदान की स्कीम हो, चाहे फसल बीमा में हम जो अनुदान दे रहे हैं उसकी स्कीम हो, उसका प्रीमियम भरने का हम काम कर रहे हैं, उन सब के अतिरिक्त किसान को जो डायरेक्ट लागत उसके हाथ से लगती है उसमें सहूलियत प्रदान करने के लिए ये राशि अलग से दी जाएगी।
तो ये अलग से राशि मिलेगी उनको। जो कुछ नेता हैं और जो कुछ संस्थाएं हैं जो सिर्फ किसानों के लिए रैली करते हैं और उनके लिए आवाज़ उठाते हैं, योगेंद्र यादव जी उनमें से एक हैं। उन्होंने थोड़ी देर पहले ट्वीट किया कि इस पॉलिसी, इस स्कीम से कुछ ज़्यादा फ़ायदा नहीं होगा। एक परिवार जिसमें 5 सदस्य हैं, अगर आप देखें तो उनको दिन का 3 रुपये मिल रहा है, उससे क्या ही किसी का फ़ायदा होगा। आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे ऐसी कैलकुलेशन को?
नहीं, इसको प्रति व्यक्ति प्रतिदिन मजदूरी के साथ में कनेक्ट करने की भाव नहीं रखना चाहिए। योगेंद्र यादव साहब को आलोचना करनी है, वो स्वतंत्र है करने के लिए, लेकिन ये प्रति व्यक्ति प्रतिदिन मजदूरी नहीं है। ये किसान जो इनपुट खरीदता है, चाहे वो डीजल खरीदता है, चाहे वो बीज खरीदता है, खाद खरीदता है, फसल उगाने के समय से हार्वेस्ट के समय में जो उसको कैश की आवश्यकता पड़ती है और जिसके लिए वो केसीसी के अतिरिक्त अन्य साधनों पर जो है वो डिपेंडेंट रहता था, तो उसको साहूकारों से पैसा लाने की आवश्यकता पड़ेगी, उसमें कहीं हद तक इसके कारण से कमी आएगी।
इसका कोई आपने जब ये डिसाइड करने के पहले प्रपोजल जो रिसर्च की होगी उसका कोई कहीं पे एग्जाम्पल या केस स्टडी किया? क्योंकि हमने देखा है कि मध्य प्रदेश में 2014 से कुछ गांवों में लोगों को महीने के महीने 200 रुपये दिए जा रहे थे। वहाँ पे एक एक्सपेरिमेंट ऐसा किया गया था, पर क्योंकि आपने डिसाइड किया है कि 6,000 साल में चार बार अलग अलग थोड़ा थोड़ा करके दिया जाएगा, कोई इसकी स्टडी की गई कहीं का? आपने केस स्टडी उठाया? जी, 3 बार।
देखिए, देश में विभिन्न प्रांतों में कई तरह की योजनाएं ऐसी चल रही हैं। आंध्र प्रदेश, तेलंगाना में राइतु बंधु योजना चल रही है, ओडिशा में कालिया योजना चल रही है, अनेक तरह की योजनाएं चल रही है। इसलिए ये योजना के बारे में किसी तरह के केस स्टडी करना, बहुत सारी केस स्टडीज देश में अवेलेबल हैं और ये योजना फुल प्रूफ एकदम से योजना है और निश्चित रूप से लागू होगी और 3 महीने, अगले 2 महीने में सब लाभ जो है वो देश के पात्र किसानों तक पहुंचे, इसको हम सुनिश्चित करेंगे।
Well, there you heard it from MOS Agriculture on how prepared the government is and how soon they expect this scheme to roll out. Let's go across to our panelists and say good evening to Gopal Agarwal, spokesperson for the BJP, Tom Vadakan, spokesperson for the Congress Party, Vivek Hall, senior journalist with me in the studio, Tathagata Satpathy, member of Parliament of Biju Janata Dal, Yamini Iyer, President and Chief Executive for Center for Policy Research. Vivek, I'm going to come to you first. So the government seems very clear that in the next 2 months, they're going to be able to give about 2,000 rupees to the farmers who are eligible, and next year onwards 6,000 rupees, and this is going to benefit them. Right. Now, farm pain has been one of the biggest talking points. Do you think this could be one of those game changers that BJP needs?
Okay, before I answer your question, I would like to just read out a quote from an American economist called Thomas Sowell, who happens to be one of my favorite economists. And, one of his lines goes like this: no one will really understand politics until they understand that politicians are not trying to solve our problems. They're trying to solve their own problems, of which getting elected and re-elected are number 1 and number 2. Whatever is number 3 is far behind. So, this basic income support of 2,000 rupees per 4 months, which is basically 6,000 rupees in a year, is one of those things. It is essentially a good marketing talking point which has been handed over to the leaders of the BJP, and over the next 2 to 3 months, or whatever time the Lok Sabha elections happen, you will see them talk about it over and over again. Now, whether this makes sense practically is a question we need to ask, primarily because how do you go about identifying these small and marginal farmers, given that land records across the country aren't really that great. The same question comes out with the pension scheme for the informal sector. How do you figure out someone works for the informal sector? If he gets paid in cash, how do you know what his income is? If his income varies through the year, how do you figure out, what his income is, whether it's 15,000, or lower? So there are all these questions. But, having said that, if you look at politics across the world, you have a phase of populism which is going around. I mean, and the best example of that is Donald Trump. Everything that he says doesn't make logical sense.
Yes.
Talking about making a wall between US and Mexico, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
But people buy it. So, what happens is that politicians have sort of become very adept at selling these broader points, which may or may not make logical sense. So which is precisely what has happened with this so-called interim budget. Yeah.
Well, since you mentioned Donald Trump, he's just tweeted just a short while ago, and he's celebrating jobs, jobs, jobs. That's what the tweet is labeled, and he's shared this a news report that says that US created 304,000 jobs in January versus 1.7 lakh, which was expected. So jobs is a big conversation there, and jobs is a big conversation here as well. But we'll come to that in just a bit. Yamini Iyer, good evening to you. What are your views, starting with the farm scheme that has been announced? It was often said that if you give farmer some money in their hand at the time that they need it, when they need to get the seeds, when they need to get the fertilizers, when they need to prepare for the sowing and harvesting, then they're not going to be looking for any more loans, and that's how you get them out of the debt cycle. Well, that may be the long-term plan. In the short term, it could work for the government, because within the next 2 months, you are handing them 2,000 rupees in their bank accounts just ahead of elections. So do you see this working for the government and the BJP?
Well, look, I mean, clearly the BJP thinks that this is going to be their big election sop. But I suspect that the Indian voter is far smarter than that and isn't going to fall for it. The farmers' crisis is a consequence of a deep-seated set of structural issues. Some amount of income transfer may have been necessary to deal with the immediate crises, but the fact that this comes without a clearer vision of how the government is trying to deal with the deeper structural issues that are causing this crisis in the first place, and more importantly, that 5 years the government has had 5 years and not much has been done. That's not going to escape the voter very quickly at all. The other problem, of course, is that as the speaker before me mentioned, doing income transfers at this scale isn't as easy as proponents of income transfers seem to make it to be. You need a very, very sophisticated administrative capacity to be able to target well, to identify the beneficiaries. You need a much better banking infrastructure, deeper penetration, and a much stronger administrative preparedness to deal with that. We don't have any of those systems in place yet for much of India, and the experience with DBT, as much as the government would like us to believe that it has led to a large amount of savings, the ground experience tells you that implementing DBT isn't as straightforward as just clicking a button and money moving into people's bank accounts. These are deeper, much more complex structural problems that have caused the crisis. 2,000 rupees now and 6,000 rupees later is not going to solve the problem, and I don't think that the voter is going to be quick enough to buy it. However, we'll wait to see what happens in a few months from now.
Yes, whether the voter will buy it or not is the big question tonight. Tom Vadakan, good evening to you. The Congress party through the day has been saying this is just a jumla. But the fact of the matter is that some of these things you yourself are demanding. Everybody has been asking the government to pay some attention to the farm sector. Everybody has been asking the government to pay some attention to those who got badly hit by demonetization. And now that that is being done, so what's the problem?
The point is, demonetization, GST, two factors that have factored in after this dispensation has come and taken over. The fallout has been across the country. The farmers, the laborer, the rural-urban divide has been breached, and the youth, you name it, everybody has been affected. Now, this is an attempt, a belated attempt at that, to try and dispense some kind of charity to these people. The Prime Minister did not have the courtesy to even tweet an arbitrary reference to these people who died waiting in lines for their own money. And today the scheme of offering money to the farmers, 6,000 rupees annually, that works up to about, if there's a 5-member family, 3 rupees each per day. I mean, it's just an insult. I mean, you cannot insult the farmer this way. If you don't have the facility or mechanism to ensure that the farmers get out of the rut that they're in, you have promised a lot of things across the board. I don't want to go into repetition of what you promised on the MSP and what have you. But the point remains, you have not done a thing. And now you hand over a lollipop to the farmer and tell him, oh, well, we'll give you 2,000 rupees before the elections. Aren't you illegally bribing? Isn't this money being offered as money for voting? I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, the methodology being used, and do you think the farmers are blind?
So,
the people of India are
Mr.
blind?
Mr.
The
Varakan,
pension that you're offering?
okay,
People
so
want jobs,
I just want to get
not
a
pensions.
sense, if you think that
People want jobs, not
rupees,
pension.
Okay, if you think that 6,000 rupees is pittance and will not help at all, can you give us a sense of what is it that Rahul Gandhi has in mind as basic minimum income or guaranteed income that you are planning to offer if you come to power? Not just, let alone the rest of the country or the poorest of the poor. Just tell us, these marginal farmers who would come in that category for your income, how much are you willing to give them?
Well, I'll tell you, in a couple of days, our manifesto is going to be out. Detailing will be done, how we intend to do all this. We have earlier given you right to food, right to education. We have given you, that's been our philosophy. It's not something we cooked up yesterday. We have the philosophy, we have the expertise, but we don't want to put it on record. We will do it when the manifesto is out.
Okay.
Congress President himself will explain the methodology being adopted.
While there is, I take your point.
This is a clear insult to the farmer.
Okay, I take the point the Congress Party is trying to make about these being announcements, keeping the election in mind, but that's a grant coming from a party that had the farm loan waiver ahead of the one election and then the Food Security Act ahead of the next election. So it's not as if you guys haven't tried the same trick. But let me go across to Mr. Satpathy before I get Gopal Agarwal to respond to everybody. Mr. Satpathy, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Do you think this tactic is going to work with the farmers, with the laborers, and the big thank you along with the tax breaks that was announced today for the middle class? All the key words were there in the speech.
I believe anything done under stress, in panic, can never be good for a nation as a whole. Even in a household, if you do something under stress, you tend to commit mistakes. This panic has set in not only with the finance ministry, but with the whole central government. I think after the results of Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, and it has affected every state after that. this panic has set in because I have been seeing in Parliament from Manmohan Singh's time and previous to that, I think from the early 90s till now, every government has tried to ignore the farmer and focus on things. Initially, they were calling it globalization, liberalization, and later on, it came down to crony capitalism. All of them, barring none, have always said, I remember very clearly, either it was in UPA 1, I think in the early stages, or maybe towards the later stages, when Mr. Manmohan Singh used to come to the Lok Sabha very rarely like Mr. Modi, but when he did, twice he said that we want to move away people, the bulk of the people from farming into other sectors. And that is how this skilling thing started, the so-called skilling thing, making everybody a fitter, a plumber, an electrician, a whole nation of servants. This was a mentality that has been persisting with us for a long time. And the present government, the present party, political party, the BJP under Mr. Narendra Ji, Damodar Das Ji, Modi Ji, is insistently pushing even further that there should be a total focus on business, on industry, and on banking.
Right.
If you see the past 4.5 years, nearly it's going to be 5 years, all the bills that have been passed in Parliament, all the laws that have been made, 99% of that were concerned with either your banks or with your financial institutions, how to make sick industries work back again, how to help particular industrialists, and everything was focused on the rich and the industrialists. Nothing in the past 4.5 years, or even prior to that, even during the UPA time, was ever focused on farming. I would say that for a farmer, the first requirement is water. You first get water to the farmer. The second requirement for a farmer is give him a clear-cut idea of where is his land. Digitize the land first.
Right.
This government is talking of digitizing 100,000 villages. What will you digitize in the village? You will give them mobile phones? Do they have the ability to snack on mobile phones when they are hungry? What is it are you trying to digitized in a village?
Okay.
You don't have digitized land records in most parts of the country. You don't have irrigation facilities. You don't have a system to reach proper seeds and fertilizers or manure or whatever near the farmer at the appropriate time.
Yes.
They, in their dimensions that they have talked about, 10 dimensions, the 8th dimension is about organic farming, about India feeding the world.
Yes.
It's a wonderful sounding thing. And I personally feel India could actually become a superpower, not with arms or with computers or with digitization. We don't need an Aadhaar card. What we need is to produce enough food that we can feed the whole of Africa, we can feed the whole of Thailand, and Malaysia should
Right.
be importing food from
So,
India.
Mr. Satpathy,
Why should we import rice from them?
Okay.
We have the ability.
So you have raised
Yes.
some very crucial points. Let me try and get a response on the BJP on what you have said and others have said. And I will come back to you because I also want to understand from you how you think the government scheme could have been better, since Odisha already has a specific farm scheme, the Kalia scheme, that has been implemented there. So we'll talk about that in just a bit. But Gopal Agarwal, your response to the points that have been raised there. And one very crucial issue is you're talking about marginal small farmers, and you're basing your criteria on their land holding. Now, a lot of the protests that have recently happened have been by farmers who don't own the land, who don't even have that in their name. The others don't have records of these land. So how are you going to implement this?
Definitely, there are certain issues that have to be tackled. But I would like to, before coming out on other issues, I would like to mention that in this budget, we have tried to focus on those sectors which we thought need support, and there was a consensus that these sectors have some distress and they need some support from the government. Those sectors have been tackled in this budget. Second important point was that even into those segments, ultimately the weaker sections, economically the most weaker segment of that sections have been tackled, and in that process we have been successful to tackle 12 crore farmers through this this income transfer, 10 crore unorganized labor force through this pension scheme, and 3 crore tax middle class tax payers through this income tax slab, this concession. So total direct support to the class from this budget is minimum 25 crore, and then there are other schemes which are general beneficial, other things, etc. But what is budget? We should all understand. Budget is at the government level. You have to match your resources, where you generate your revenues and how you allocate them. And within that allocation, there has to be a choice. There has to be sections which will be left out. So you identify the best possible way. If the resources is no constraint, you can give to anybody. But when you are having a constraint, then you effectively allocate your resources. That's very important, and the government has done, and therefore I give 10 out of 10 to the Modi government, because ultimately you cannot see the budget or any government activity in isolation.
Okay.
You should look in last 4.5 years or 5 years.
Yes.
There has been a focus on various issues, and the government has worked to a plan.
Okay.
If you don't create a Jan Dhan account, you cannot control the leakages.
Yes.
If you don't control the GST and demonetization, there is a leakages in the taxation. Corruption, policy matter, allocation of resources is a problem. So within that parameters, we have been able to do best. And one thing I would also like to tell you is, definitely landless labor, other issues have been left out. They need support also. They also need support. Government will look into it. But one budget, one issue, you cannot say that if you have done this, that is left, therefore this is bad. This kind of negativity
actually,
will
none
not
of us
take
have
you
said
anywhere.
that yet.
If
We are actually
Congress
only
is
talking about what you
shouting
have
so loud-
announced.
No,
we are
if the
only
Congress is
talking
shouting so
about what
loud-
you have announced today, Mr.
No,
Gopal
Congress
Agarwal.
is shouting so much. No,
Mr. Tom Walakar is not shouting on
the
this
Congress
panel,
is
so let's
shouting
just
so
limit the
much. They had
conversation
all the 60
to what
years
we are
to do
talking
it.
about right now. And at least I will appreciate the fact that you have
shouting
admitted
means-
that the government has come out with
I'm telling you
announcements
is,
for the sectors
if the
which are
Congress had a
distressed.
better-
Mr. Gopal Agarwal, point taken, I heard you out. Thank you for admitting the fact that at
I'm
least
telling you,
these two
if the
sectors
Congress
needed
had
some
better
attention
ideas-
and that they were distressed
if the
sectors.
Congress had better ideas.
Okay, finish your point, please. If the Congress had better
if the
ideas,
Congress
then
has better ideas, they had all the 60 years. They had all the 60 years to implement. If they had put on right to education, why there are uneducated people? If they had given right to food, still why there are people who are dying with hunger?
Okay.
So if they say that we are the solution, they had 60 years to implement them. Why? They are the culprit of this nation.
So then,
Everybody
on
should
the same
put them
terms,
to
Mr.
task.
Gopal Agarwal,
After
will you also
60 years
admit?
of rule,
Will you also admit that your Skill India, that your Make in India, that your fight against black money has failed? That all the steps that you said you will take to create jobs has not given us any jobs, which is why
Not
you
at all failed.
need to
It's
go
a
back
work in
now
progress,
and give
ma'am.
these kind of softs to people who don't have a job.
Hey, this is a work in progress.
Okay, I'm glad you're saying that
You compare
during
60
the
years
interim
of
budget
work
ahead of the
and
elections.
failure of the
Mr. Gopal Agarwal.
government
Okay.
with 4.5 years of efforts of our government.
I got that. Yes, that has been the narrative by your party
4.5
today.
years of our concentrated
Let's take the
focused
conversation
effort.
forward.
You
Vivek Kaul has
compare
a few
60
points to
years of
make.
failed
Yamini
work.
Iyer also wants to come in, but first to Vivek Kaul, please. Yes.
Okay, on Mr. Agarwal's Congress point, I'll just repeat something I had said on an earlier show. There's this line in the movie Diwar कि औरों के पाप गिनाने से अपने पाप कम नहीं हो जाते हैं. So let's keep it at that. The second point I wanted to make was, Mr. Agarwal gave the budget a 10 on 10. So he's behaving like, all the Indian corporates who give the budget 10.5 out of 10, 5 minutes after the budget, even without having glanced through it once.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure it would have happened earlier in the day today. The third point I wanted to make was, with all these SOPs that are on offer, the BJP is basically indirectly admitting that demonetization and a badly planned and implemented GST essentially ended up hurting the economy quite a lot. So, I mean, they'll never say it on record, but like smart politicians, they're trying to address it, and that's a good part. The final point I'd like to make is, instead of coming with all this paraphernalia to distribute money, it would have been just simple to put some money directly into the Jan Dhan account, and by doing that, they would have at least returned a very small part of the rupees 15 lakh that
Yes,
they had
they
originally
promised.
promised us. So yeah.
Yes, well, perhaps some part of it is going to come to some people in this scheme that they have announced. Yamini Iyer, on the point of the damage that was done by GST and demonetization, many are making the argument today that this pension scheme that has been announced for the workers in the unorganized sector is also to show them that we know, we care, and we'll try and fix this. Will that help? Because at the end of the day, this is still pension that they will only get once they retire. This benefit is not going to reflect anytime soon.
Look, I mean, the fact is that India has a large vulnerable population, a migrant vulnerable population, vulnerable because they are moving from rural to urban, and vulnerable because they tend to move in and out of poverty. And a large significant proportion of these unorganized workers are also young workers. So it is very important to create a much, much stronger social safety net for them. And in that sense, an unorganized workers pension is exactly the right thing to do, and it's the right move to make. Of course, like a lot of things in this budget, one can argue that it's too little too late. This whole idea of contributory pensions and expanding the pension base has been floating with this government since 2015, I think, when the Atal Pension Yojana was first launched. But there are two issues that need to be considered. One, with the particular proposal that is on the table as of today's budget, it's on the one hand, it is offering a new framework for pensions, but on the other, it is creating all these new layers of eligibility, which in fact is going to make the whole process much harder. And that's going to create a significant implementation problem. So that's the first issue. The second issue, if you look at a history of pension schemes of this nature, the uptake of these pensions has been pretty low. Even in cities, urban centers like Delhi, etc., the reason that the uptake has been low is partly because of an awareness issue, partly because of a certain unwillingness on beneficiaries' part to actually think long term and begin engaging with financial instruments in new ways, and pensions, contributory pensions, are one such. And also the inability of the government to move beyond thinking that all of these things can be implemented just by a click of the button. It needs a very large administrative preparedness to be able to implement things like this. Lastly, on pensions, the two or three pensions that government after government has been implementing for the last 20, 30 years, the National Old Age Pension Scheme, the Widows Pension Scheme, disability pensions, these are long-term pensions that have been in the system, and these are pensions that are meant for the most vulnerable populations.
Right.
So the interesting challenge that India has today, on the one hand, you have to cater to the current working population, people who are going to become old over the next 20 to 30 years. But at the same time, you have a large vulnerable aged population, and including other vulnerable communities like widows, etc., for whom a certain pension scheme has been in place. But the pension amount is so low; it has been stuck at rupees 200 from the central government for
Yes.
the last since 2006, and despite multiple appeals, nothing has been done to move forward. So we keep talking about new schemes,
500
new
no.
transfers, and new programs, but we don't bother to fix the old. The same thing with the income transfer. If infusing more cash into the economy was a necessary condition to deal with the current crisis, what happened to Narega? You have an infrastructure.
Yes.
In fact, that infrastructure will help you tackle the problem that the income transfer cannot help you tackle, which is that it will allow you to provide an income transfer to the labor community, that are people who are not landholders. But actually, Narega allocations have not increased. In fact, they've remained stagnant. They said 60,000 crores, but in the revised estimates, Narega allocations allocations amounted to 61,000 crores. So in fact, the government has already exhausted the money it has had for this for the 17-18 fiscal year. So there's a lot of confusion that is emerging in all these different.
Okay, so
and-
Gopal
and-
Agarwal, the point here again is one more big announcement that you made for the unorganized sector, but how are you going to implement it, especially because it's the unorganized sector? How do you know who is eligible, who should be getting it? And I mean, at the end of the day, if they're already registering on your system, then are they even the unorganized labor sector anymore? And secondly, if they're earning about less than 15,000, then 100 rupees as the contribution, do you think many people are going to sign up for it?
So that is for them to decide whether they want the pension of 3,000 rupees per month after the age of 60. That is one good thing I think everybody would like, by just paying 100 rupees a month, and similar contribution from the government will help. What I would like to tell you here is that there has been an ambitious target by our government, Modi ji, in everywhere. If you see in the Jan Dhan account, even in Ayushman recently, the target was 10 crore families, 50 crore people. So we put up a strong target. The Ujjwala Yojana, we never thought that we will be able to achieve a 6 crore target of gas connection. Even Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, 9 crore toilets. So there has been an ambitious target. 12 crore mudra loan. All these targets have
Without
been,
water. The toilets
there is
have
a
no
performance
water.
metrics through which we move ahead. And finance, without, I would like to tell you is that finance minister also said that we have identified 115 aspirational districts where we are working in a push model.
Okay.
That these 7 important schemes like Ujala, Ujjwala, Swachh Bharat, the collector will be made responsible that each and every person in that district gets this benefit of, if he is eligible. So that is the push model that we are working.
But you know, Mr.
Most
Gopal Agarwal, we
important
come back
part
to the
in our
point.
operation is, Modi ji's operation
Okay,
is that.
but we are coming back to the point that
focus
Yamini Iyer was
and,
making.
We take ambitious target and achieve it.
We come back to the point that Yamini
I'm
Iyer was
telling
making. You
in
may have made it. You may have,
unorganized
on
sector
paper,
also.
achieved this ambitious target, Mr. Gopal Agarwal. But you've built toilets in many places where there is no water, and those empty concrete blocks are not really being used. You've provided LPG cylinders to women and to households who do not have the money to pay for the LPG refills, and so those cylinders are lying in a corner. So effectively, you've generated an open bank accounts for people who still don't know how to use it, who have no money to put in, and those bank accounts are lying empty. So yes, while on paper you can say you've met your target, are
So
you
want to
really
tell
able
us that
to
without
say
bank account
that
they were better off?
I'm sorry, what?
Were those people better off without bank
The
account?
cows are
Now,
better off.
you would
If
have
they-
known what I
they
was going to
did
say
not-
had you allowed me to finish my point and ask you the question, Mr. Gopal Agarwal. You didn't allow me to ask the question. Don't jump the gun. The question was to the point that Yamini Iyer was making. Are you also making the same mistake of announcing schemes and then saying that you've achieved it without ensuring a proper implementation, without ensuring that whatever benefit you want people to get, those people are actually able to get that benefit?
No, Faye, I would like to tell you is that when Ujjwala gas connection was being started, this Give It Up campaign was started, we never thought that we will be able to put up gas connection to 5 crore females. 34 crore account, we never thought that we will be achieving that. Earlier it was 7.5 crore accounts. So here also we have started in the unorganized sector that universal account number for the construction laborer. Even if you see the EFF data, that we are saying that it is a moving of the informal sector labor close to the formal sector.
Okay.
So across there are simplifications
So,
with regard to
okay,
industrial dispute.
a lot of our
ESI,
panelists have points to
we are
make.
giving-
So, Mr. Gopal Agarwal also just pointing out, I know it's been a long day for you, but just reminding you that the 10 o'clock show is anchored by Tanvi and not Faye, and this is Tanvi here who's been speaking to you all this while. Vivek, you wanted to make a point before I go to our political guests who both wanted to come in as well.
I wanted to make a very general point. A couple of years back, the economic survey had made a very interesting point and they said that there are 950 centrally sponsored schemes. So, so basically, if you look at the Indian bureaucracy, it's like a funnel. It's very wide at the top. So we are very good at coming up with new schemes and planning them out. But when it comes to implementing, the bureaucracy gets very narrow at the end. So which is why, making a collector in charge of 37 schemes, I mean, how will any man, implement 37 schemes or be responsible for it? It's just not fair. So our bureaucracy at the lowest level simply cannot take on any more new schemes. The state capacity is not there. I mean, the sooner the politicians understand this and try running the schemes which are already there. The Public Provident Fund has been around since the late 60s. So, I mean, you can play around with that. There is a post office in every Indian village. So, instead of launching newer schemes to sort of impress the voter every year, I mean, you just concentrate on the things that are already there.
Okay, Mr. Gopal Agarwal, just hold on for a minute because two of our other panelists wanted to say something. Okay, 5 seconds.
5 seconds, 5 seconds. It is only 7 schemes and that is only for the eligible person. It is not for all. And those who are eligible to have the benefit of 7 schemes. So that is only has been made as a target, and already most of the people have been benefited. Those have been left out. The collector has made responsible to get
my
them
apologies,
into the net.
I heard 37. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Tom Varakan, I'm coming to you next because I want to also hear from the Congress party. You already made a series of announcements in the state election which are also populist measures. Rahul Gandhi has also already spoken about the minimum income guarantee. In Rajasthan today, you already rolled out the income for the unemployed, the assured income for the skilled and educated unemployed, and hiked that significantly. So are we expecting Congress to now further that and increase those kind of populist announcements, keeping in mind that the government has already made quite a few of those in the budget?
Tanvi, before I complete your answering your question, I think there are 2 issues which I need to address. Mr. Agarwal, who's been, kind of putting us into a lullaby situation late at this hour. But the point I'm trying to make is this entire thing about pension scheme and all that is their self-goal. When they bought this demonetization, when a lot of people lost their jobs, and now they want to pension them off. The point is, we are not asking for pensions, we are asking for jobs. And jobs for the last 40 years, the present report is that it's the lowest. So Mr. Agarwal needs to address the question of not so much of pensions. Pensions anyway, like our journalist friend here, Mr. Kaul said, you have this Provident Fund facility in the post offices and all that. They could be revised, there could be fine-tuning of those schemes. Be what it may, but where are the jobs, Tanvi? We need the jobs, and they have no answers for that. And the jobs are not there. You're sending people on pension. We want jobs. We want people to work. These are healthy people who are asking for jobs, and there's no jobs at all.
Yes.
The point here... No, but then they're the people who said and promised jobs. I mean, they said 2 crore jobs. Now, where are the jobs? We are asking them that question. And we have hit a 40-year low.
Yes.
That's the issue. We never made such promises, and we have failed. Yes, there has been problems in our times, but this is
the problem of lack of jobs and low job creation started during your era, but you can get away because you guys never promised us any jobs, and that's the promise of the BJP. Yes. So that's interesting. And on a lighter note, I know you said existing schemes, and Vivek was also making that point, but it's a little difficult to imagine BJP using the same schemes when you guys named all the schemes after Nehru and Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi. I mean, frankly, you can't really expect BJP to continue schemes which were named after, people they are so obsessed about criticizing and attacking all the time. Just on the lighter note. But quickly going across to Mr.
That's the post office scheme, no?
Yes.
Post office is universal.
Yes, I'm not talking about one specific scheme. In a larger context, I was saying that Mr. Satpathy has been wanting to come in as well. Mr. Satpathy, go ahead, please.
No, I was listening to everybody. The Congress talks as if the Congress is not responsible for all the dismal failures that this country has seen. The BJP talks as if even now, are nearly completing 5 years, they are not responsible for anything that they have done. So it's just a blame game. Listen, the Congress also is not clearly coming up with what it wants to do in future. For example, they are talking about demonetization. Are they willing to come up and commit that they will, if ever, again they come to power, will they bring a bill in Parliament that something like playing around with the currency of the country cannot be a one-man decision. It will need the concurrence not only of the union cabinet, but also of certain states. There need not be a surprise element. This is an economic move. How can one executive, a temporary executive, play around with the currency of the country? Are they willing to come up with that? Are they willing to come up with a policy for irrigation? And we were talking about the collectors having some 7 schemes. I mean, I think people are not in touch with reality. A collector, you know what a collector has to do? He is actually finally the grounded authority of the government, both the state governments and the central governments. Yes. The collector has to be responsible for law and order, sometimes more than the superintendent of police. The collector is the head of all revenue matters. The collector has a public grievance day once a week. The collector is also acting as the district magistrate, has to sit in court and decide on revenue matters, on excise matters. The collector gives out licenses for liquor bars. The collector is overloaded. What 37 projects? The collector probably has 370 duties to do within a single 24-hour day. So we are just burdening the lower bureaucracy, which the efficiency is not increasing, in which the efficiency is not increasing.
Yes.
Corruption, when we talk about corruption, okay, there is this huge corruption, the big corruption of the corporates funding the judges, funding the bureaucracy, funding the politicians. But there is also the corruption which a common man faces day to day, and that is in the police station, that is in the block office, that is with the Tehsildar. You know, the base level of this government, nothing moves unless you bribe.
Well,
therefore,
I agree
when
with
we
you.
are talking about schemes,
I'm sorry I have to interrupt you there, Mr. Satpathy, but we've completely run out of time. So I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but I've completely run out of time. So I'm going to thank all of our panelists. But to the point that Mr. Satpathy was also making about, exercises like demonetization, and that there has to be a system in place where you need approval and you need involvement of other factors. Maybe just we need to be thankful to this government for doing that, because if you look at the latest revised GDP data, India has registered the best growth in the last 4 years in the year demonetization was announced. So that's what the government would have to say about it. But viewers, this is your decision. We've put out the facts for you. We've got the experts to come and tell you. We've broken it down for you through the day, and in the coming days, we'll continue to analyze these schemes. It is your decision whether or not you think that the government has made its intent clear, whether or not this party and this government is committed to serving you and to actually looking into what will help you and what will make your life better. Do you think these schemes will change the life of an Indian? That is going to be your call. At the end of the day, the impact of these schemes will only come out later. But are we buying the story enough to vote this party back to power for these to be implemented properly? Is your decision. Thank you so much for joining us on this debate.